Captain Vextal stood before the main display screen in the Zephyrian Deep Space Monitoring Station. His four eyes focused on the strange object that had appeared on their sensors 3 hours ago. The object moved in a straight line toward their sector of space. It was not following any known trade route or diplomatic channel. "Run another scan," Vextal ordered his crew. His voice carried the authority of someone who had spent 40 years watching the empty spaces between stars. "I want to know what we are dealing with." The sensor operator's tentacles danced across the control panel. "Sir, the object appears to be artificial. It is definitely a spacecraft of some kind. The design is very strange. It has sharp edges and flat surfaces, no curves like proper ships." Vextal moved closer to the screen. The image showed a gray vessel that looked like someone had welded metal plates together. It was nothing like the smooth, organic shapes that civilized species used for their ships. The galaxy had learned long ago that curved hulls moved through space more efficiently. They also looked more beautiful. This ship looked like a crude tool made by someone who cared nothing for beauty. "What about the power signature?" Vextal asked. "That is what makes no sense, sir. The readings keep changing. Sometimes it looks like a small trading vessel. Other times it shows power levels that should not be possible for something that size." The communications officer spoke up from her station. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the unknown vessel. They are broadcasting on multiple frequencies. The message is in a language our computers do not recognize. Put it through the universal translator," Vextal commanded. Static filled the air for a moment. Then a voice spoke in accented but understandable Galactic Standard. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Defiance. We are on a peaceful exploration mission. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." Vextal felt his scales ripple with surprise. Earth was not in any database he knew. The galaxy kept careful records of all known civilizations. A species advanced enough to build starships should have been discovered long ago. "Open a channel," he told his communications officer. "Unknown vessel. This is Captain Vextal of the Zephyrian Monitoring Station. You have entered civilized space. Please state your origin and purpose." The response came quickly. "Captain Vextal, we come from a planet called Earth in what you might call the local group. We recently developed faster-than-light travel. This is our first long-range exploration mission." "We mean no harm to anyone." Vextal's mind raced. A species that had just discovered faster-than-light travel should not be able to build ships with the power readings his sensors were detecting. Something was wrong with either his equipment or his understanding of the situation. "Maintain your current course and speed," Vextal transmitted. "We will escort you to Processing Station Alpha for proper first contact procedures. Do not deviate from your path or activate any weapons systems." "Understood, Captain. We have no weapons currently active. We look forward to meeting representatives of galactic civilization." Vextal closed the channel and turned to his sensor operator. "I want a complete tactical scan of that vessel. Use the deep-range sensors. I need to know everything about their capabilities before we let them anywhere near a processing station." The operator nodded and began the scanning sequence. Deep-range tactical scans were normally used for identifying potential threats. They could penetrate most forms of shielding and armor to reveal the internal structure of a ship. The scan would take 30 minutes to complete, but it would give them detailed information about the strange vessel's true capabilities. While they waited, Vextal studied the basic sensor readings again. The ship called itself Defiance. That was an odd name for a peaceful exploration vessel. Most civilized species chose names that reflected hope, discovery, or friendship for their first contact ships. Defiance suggested something very different. The ship's design also bothered him. The flat surfaces and sharp angles looked functional rather than artistic. Every civilized race he knew had developed beautiful ships once they mastered space travel. Beauty was a sign of advanced culture. This ship looked like it had been built by engineers who cared only about making it work. "Sir," the sensor operator called out. "The deep scan is showing some very unusual readings. The ship appears to be constructed entirely of refined metals and ceramics. No biocomponents at all. The power source is some kind of controlled nuclear reaction. Very primitive by our standards." "Nuclear reactions?" Vextal asked. "Are you certain? Most species abandon nuclear power once they discover zero-point energy systems." "Yes, sir. Definitely nuclear. But the power output is enormous, much larger than any nuclear system should be able to produce. And, sir, there is something else. The ship's hull is incredibly thick, much thicker than necessary for normal space travel. Bextal felt a chill run through his body. Thick hulls were used for only one purpose: protection from weapons. No peaceful exploration vessel needed armor that heavy. "Continue the scan," he ordered. "I want to know what is inside that ship." As the minutes passed, more disturbing information came to light. The ship carried multiple launch tubes that could only be weapon systems. The computers detected chemical propellants and dense metal projectiles. These humans still used kinetic weapons, guns that fired solid metal bullets. Such weapons had been considered barbaric for thousands of years. "Sir?" The sensor operator's voice was tense. "I am detecting fusion warheads. Multiple fusion warheads. And sir, the yield calculations are showing weapons capable of destroying entire cities." Vextal stared at the sensor readings in disbelief. This supposedly peaceful exploration vessel carried enough nuclear weapons to devastate a planet. What kind of species built their first starship with such terrible firepower? "Contact High Command immediately," he ordered. "Tell them we have a first contact situation that requires immediate attention, and keep monitoring that ship. If they so much as charge a single weapon system, I want to know about it." The communications officer worked frantically to establish a secure channel to Zephyrian High Command. This situation was beyond anything covered in their first contact protocols. They were trained to handle peaceful species making their first steps into space. They were not prepared for dealing with a heavily armed warship disguised as an exploration vessel. "Sir," the sensor operator called out again, "the scan is complete. You need to see this." Vextal looked at the final readout and felt his blood turn cold. The ship was not just heavily armed and armored. It was built like a fortress that could fly through space. Every system was designed for war. Even the exploration equipment seemed to double as military sensors. But the most terrifying discovery was hidden in the ship's computer banks. The scan had detected references to other ships. Many other ships. The humans had not sent just one vessel to explore the galaxy. They had built an entire fleet. Vextal realized that first contact with humanity might not be the peaceful meeting between civilizations that everyone expected. The humans had not just discovered space travel. They had weaponized it from the very beginning. As he watched the Defiance continue its steady approach toward their station, Vextal wondered what kind of species would name their peaceful exploration ship after an act of rebellion. He was beginning to suspect that humanity's definition of peace might be very different from the rest of the galaxies. Chief Analyst Morden had been working with sensor technology for over 60 years. He had analyzed everything from ancient derelict ships to the most advanced vessels in the galaxy. But the readings from the human ship made no sense at all. "Computer, run diagnostic on deep scan sensors," Morden commanded for the third time in 2 hours. His 6 arms moved quickly across multiple control panels as he tried to find the error in his equipment. All sensors operating within normal parameters. The computer responded in its calm voice. "No malfunctions detected." Morden stared at the data streaming across his screens. According to his instruments, the primitive human ship was generating more power than a Galactic Council dreadnought. That should have been impossible. The ship was using nuclear fusion, a technology that most civilizations had abandoned thousands of years ago. Nuclear power simply could not produce that much energy. "Maybe their fusion reactors are more advanced than we thought," Morden muttered to himself. He pulled up the technical specifications for the most powerful fusion systems ever built. Even the experimental reactors developed by the Altarian Science Collective could not match what the human ship was producing. The power readings were just the beginning of the problems. The tactical scan showed that the ship carried kinetic weapons, simple guns that fired metal projectiles. Such weapons were considered primitive and ineffective. Modern ships used energy shields that could easily stop any physical projectile. But the math told a different story. Morden ran the calculations 3 times before he believed the results. The human kinetic weapons were not firing simple bullets. They were launching projectiles at incredible speeds with tremendous force. The impact energy would be enough to punch through any known shield system and tear apart modern ship hulls. "This cannot be right," Morden said aloud. He called up the shield specifications for every major warship class in the galaxy. The computer showed him the numbers in clear detail. Even the thickest energy shields would offer no protection against the human weapons. The problem was that civilized species had not fought real wars for thousands of years. Military technology had focused on peaceful deterrence rather than actual destruction. Energy shields were designed to stop the light energy weapons that everyone used. No one had considered the need to stop heavy metal objects moving at tremendous speed. Morden began to understand why the human ship's hull was so thick. They had built their vessel to survive the same kinds of weapons they carried. While galactic ships relied on shields and speed for protection, the humans had chosen heavy armor. Their ship could probably survive direct hits from weapons that would destroy any other vessel. The analyst pulled up historical records from the Galactic Archives. He searched for information about kinetic weapons and armored spacecraft. Most of the files were thousands of years old. They came from the time before civilized species had learned to resolve conflicts through diplomacy and trade. What he found made his blood run cold. The ancient warships had been terrible instruments of destruction. Civilizations had built fleets of armored vessels that fired solid projectiles at each other. The weapons had been crude but devastating. Entire planets had been reduced to rubble by ships very similar to what the humans had built. The galaxy had moved beyond such primitive warfare. Modern conflicts were settled through economic pressure, political maneuvering, and at worst limited engagements with non-lethal energy weapons. No one had seen a real war for over 3,000 years, but the humans had apparently never learned to be civilized. They were still building ships designed for the kind of warfare that the galaxy had forgotten. Worse, they had improved on the ancient designs. Their kinetic weapons were far more powerful than anything in the historical records. Morden opened a communication channel to the monitoring station's command center. "Captain Vextal, I need to speak with you immediately. The tactical scan results are extremely disturbing." "On my way," came the captain's voice. Minutes later, Captain Vextal entered the analysis center with two of his senior officers. Morden had prepared a complete presentation of his findings. The main display screen showed the human ship alongside technical specifications for various galactic vessels. "The power readings are definitely correct," Morden began without preamble. "The human ship is generating approximately 4 times more energy than our most advanced dreadnought. They are using nuclear fusion reactors, but somehow they have made them far more efficient than should be possible." Captain Vextal studied the display. "How can a primitive technology produce such advanced results?" "That is what I have been trying to understand," Morden replied. "I believe the humans have taken a different approach to technological development. Instead of abandoning nuclear power when they discovered more elegant solutions, they continued to improve it. Their fusion reactors appear to be the result of thousands of years of continuous refinement." The captain's scales rippled with concern. "What about their weapon systems?" Morden touched a control and the display changed to show weapon specifications. This is where the situation becomes truly alarming. The humans are using kinetic weapons exclusively, no energy weapons of any kind, but their kinetic systems are far beyond anything in our historical records. "Kinetic weapons are ineffective against modern shields," one of the senior officers said. "No," Morden corrected. "Kinetic weapons are ineffective against shields designed to stop energy weapons. Our shields work by dispersing or reflecting energy. They cannot stop solid matter moving at high speed. The human projectiles would pass right through our shields and destroy our ships." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. The entire galactic fleet was defenseless against human weapons. Ships that had been considered invincible were actually as fragile as paper against the primitive but devastating firepower that the humans carried. "How many weapons does their ship carry?" Captain Vextal asked. Morden manipulated the display to show a cutaway view of the human vessel. 24 primary kinetic cannons, 48 secondary guns, and over 200-point defense systems. The ship also carries nuclear missiles with fusion warheads. Each missile has enough power to destroy a city. "By the ancient void," the captain whispered. "That is more firepower than an entire battle group." "Yes, sir. And remember, they called this ship a light cruiser. If this is their idea of a small ship, we do not want to see what they consider a battleship." The senior officers exchanged worried glances. Military doctrine throughout the galaxy was based on the assumption that all civilized species use similar technologies. Battle plans assumed that enemy ships would have roughly equivalent capabilities. No one had prepared for dealing with a species that used completely different approaches to warfare. "There is something else," Morden continued. "I detected communication logs in the ship's computer systems. The humans are in regular contact with their home planet. They have also mentioned other ships in their fleet. This is not an isolated exploration vessel. It is part of a larger organization. Captain Vextal began pacing the length of the analysis center. How many ships are we talking about? Unknown, sir. But the communication logs suggest at least 12 other vessels of similar or larger size. And there are references to construction facilities on their homeworld. They appear to be building more ships continuously. The implications were staggering. Humanity had not just built one primitive but effective warship. They had created an entire fleet of vessels that could destroy any ship in the galaxy. They had weaponized space travel from the very beginning. We need to contact the Galactic Council immediately, Captain Vextal decided. This is beyond a simple first contact situation. We may be looking at the emergence of a new military power that could threaten the stability of civilized space. Morden nodded agreement. Sir, I recommend that we also begin sharing this data with our military allies. The defense fleets need to know that their current weapons and shields may be completely ineffective against human technology. As the meeting broke up, Morden remained in the analysis center to continue studying the sensor data. The more he learned about the human ship, the more worried he became. The humans had not just preserved ancient military technology. They had perfected it. The galaxy was about to meet a species that had never learned to stop fighting. And that species had just arrived with weapons that could destroy everything that civilized space had built. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the Great Chamber on Nexus Prime. Representatives from 12 major civilizations had gathered. Within hours of receiving the disturbing report from the Zephyrian monitoring station, the chamber, normally filled with peaceful debate about trade agreements and cultural exchanges, now buzzed with urgent conversation about potential military threats. High Counselor Theta 9 called the session to order. Her synthesized voice carried clearly through the vast space. Fellow representatives, we face an unprecedented situation. A previously unknown species has entered civilized space with technology that challenges our understanding of military capabilities. The holographic display in the center of the chamber showed the scan data from the human ship. Every representative had received copies of the technical analysis. But seeing the information presented in the formal council setting made it seem even more alarming. The species calls themselves humans, Theta 9 continued. They claim to come from a planet called Earth, which does not appear in any of our star charts. Their ship demonstrates power output and weapons capabilities that exceed our most advanced military vessels. Ambassador Krellnan of the Hegemony Navy leaned forward in his chair. His warrior species had maintained the largest military force in the galaxy for over 1,000 years. High Counselor, surely this is some kind of measurement error. No primitive species could develop technology superior to our own. Theta 9 manipulated the holographic display to show detailed comparisons between human and galactic technology. The measurements have been verified multiple times. The human vessel generates approximately 4 times more power than our most advanced dreadnought. Their weapon systems use kinetic projectiles that can penetrate our energy shields. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. Energy shields had been the foundation of galactic military doctrine for millennia. Ships, stations, and even planetary defenses relied on shield technology for protection. The idea that such defenses could be useless was deeply disturbing. Admiral Krivok, the senior military officer of the Hegemony, stood to address the council. If these readings are accurate, our entire fleet could be destroyed by a single human vessel. Our ships are designed for conflicts between civilized species using civilized weapons. We are not prepared for primitive but devastating kinetic attacks. Representative Zilandra of the Peaceful Collective raised her hand to speak. Surely we are overreacting. Just because this species has powerful weapons does not mean they intend to use them aggressively. Perhaps they are simply more cautious than other species when exploring unknown space. Theta 9 highlighted specific portions of the human ship's design. The evidence suggests otherwise. The vessel is heavily armored and carries enough weapons to destroy an entire city. More concerning, they refer to this as a light cruiser. If this represents their idea of a small ship, we must assume their larger vessels are proportionally more dangerous. The Altarian Science Collective representative, Dr. Vorthak, studied the technical data with obvious fascination. The humans appear to have taken a completely different approach to technological development. While we pursued elegant solutions using exotic matter and dimensional manipulation, they continued to refine primitive but effective methods. Their nuclear fusion reactors are masterpieces of engineering efficiency. Engineering efficiency does not concern me, Admiral Krivok replied sharply. What concerns me is that they have built what amounts to a flying fortress armed with weapons that can destroy our most powerful ships. And they have done this while claiming to be on a peaceful exploration mission. Ambassador Yilshin of the Trade Federation spoke up from her position near the back of the chamber. Has anyone considered the economic implications? If human technology is truly superior to our own, they could dominate galactic markets. Their advanced fusion reactors alone could revolutionize power generation throughout civilized space. Economic concerns are secondary to survival, Admiral Krivok stated. A species that arms their exploration vessels like battleships is not interested in peaceful trade. They are preparing for conquest. High Counselor Theta 9 called for order as the debate grew more heated. We must consider all possibilities. The humans may simply come from a more dangerous region of space. Perhaps they have encountered threats that required them to develop such powerful defensive capabilities. The representative from the Xenological Research Institute, Professor Maltek, had been studying the cultural implications of the human arrival. I have been analyzing the limited communication we have received from the human vessel. Their language patterns suggest a species accustomed to conflict. They use military terminology even when discussing peaceful activities. What kind of military terminology? Theta 9 asked. They refer to their mission as an operation. Their ship movements are described as maneuvers. Most telling, they named their exploration vessel Defiance. That suggests a culture that views opposition and resistance as normal parts of existence. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. Civilized species chose names for their ships that reflected hope, discovery, or harmony. Only warrior cultures named their vessels after acts of rebellion or resistance. Ambassador Krelnan stood again, his expression grim. How many ships do the humans possess? If this is just one vessel from a larger fleet, we need to know what we are facing. Theta 9 consulted the intelligence reports. Unknown. The humans have mentioned other ships, but they have not provided specific numbers. Sensor readings detected references to construction facilities on their homeworld. They appear to be actively building more vessels. This gets worse by the hour, Admiral Krivok muttered. Not only do they have superior military technology, but they are mass-producing it. How long before they decide that the galaxy needs their protection whether we want it or not? Dr. Vorthak raised a scientific point that had been overlooked. We should consider that the humans may not realize how advanced their technology is compared to ours. From their perspective, they may have built a simple exploration ship using standard methods. They may be as surprised by our shock as we are by their capabilities. That possibility makes them even more dangerous, Admiral Krivok replied. A species that builds warships without realizing they are warships is unpredictable. They may escalate conflicts without understanding the consequences. Representative Zilandra tried once more to find a peaceful solution. Perhaps we should focus on establishing diplomatic relations. If we can understand their culture and motivations, we may be able to find common ground for peaceful coexistence. Peaceful coexistence requires mutual respect and roughly equal power, Admiral Krivok countered. The humans have weapons that make our entire military obsolete. That is not a foundation for peaceful relations. That is a foundation for conquest and subjugation. High Counselor Theta 9 studied the faces of the various representatives. Fear, confusion, and anger were evident throughout the chamber. The arrival of humanity had shattered the comfortable assumptions that had guided galactic civilization for thousands of years. We need more information before we can make informed decisions, Theta 9 decided. I propose that we authorize a formal first contact delegation to meet with the humans. We will learn their intentions and capabilities through direct negotiation. And if their intentions are hostile, Admiral Krivok asked, then we will face that challenge when it arrives. For now, we must hope that humanity can be reasoned with. The alternative is too terrible to contemplate. The vote was close, but the Council agreed to pursue diplomatic contact with the humans. However, every representative understood that they were potentially negotiating with a species that could destroy their civilization if talks broke down. As the emergency session concluded, Admiral Krivok approached Theta 9 privately. High Counselor, I must recommend that we begin preparing for the worst-case scenario. Our military forces need time to develop new tactics and technologies to counter human weapons. Agreed, Theta 9 replied quietly. Begin preparations immediately, but do so discreetly. We cannot afford to appear hostile while diplomatic talks are ongoing. The council chamber emptied slowly as representatives returned to their home systems to brief their governments. Each carried the same troubling message. The galaxy had just encountered a species that could potentially destroy everything they had built. And that species claimed to be peaceful explorers. Dr. Yolandra had spent her entire career studying the development of civilizations across the galaxy. As the lead xenoarchaeologist for the Galactic Research Institute, she had analyzed the cultural evolution of hundreds of species. But nothing in her experience had prepared her for what she discovered about humanity. The assignment had seemed straightforward when it arrived from the Galactic Council. Research the background of the newly discovered human species and provide a cultural assessment for the diplomatic team. Standard procedure for first contact situations. Dr. Yolandra expected to find the usual pattern of technological development that characterized all civilized races. She was wrong. Computer, display the timeline for human technological development. Dr. Yolandra commanded from her research station deep within the Institute's archives. The holographic display showed a progression that made no sense. Instead of the expected pattern of gradual advancement toward peaceful technologies, human development showed continuous military innovation, spanning thousands of years. Every major technological breakthrough had been immediately weaponized. This cannot be correct, Dr. Yolandra muttered. She cross-referenced the data with patterns from other species. Every civilized race followed the same general path. They developed basic tools, discovered agriculture, built cities, created art and culture, and eventually transcended their violent origins to become peaceful members of galactic society. Humans had followed the first parts of the pattern, but they had never transcended violence. Instead, they had perfected it. The research data came from long-range sensors that had been secretly observing human space for several decades. The information had been classified until the recent first contact situation made it relevant. Dr. Yolandra now had access to detailed observations of human civilization, and the picture they painted was deeply disturbing. Human history was an unbroken chain of warfare. Their planet showed evidence of thousands of conflicts, from primitive tribal battles to devastating global wars that had reshaped entire continents. Most shocking of all, the wars had never really ended. Humans had simply become more sophisticated about how they fought them. Dr. Yolandra pulled up tactical assessments of human military installations. Their homeworld was covered with fortifications, weapons manufacturing facilities, and training centers. They had turned their entire planet into a military base. Even their civilian infrastructure seemed designed to support warfare. Computer, analyze the human approach to conflict resolution, she requested. The results were immediate and chilling. Humans had never developed effective, peaceful alternatives to warfare. While other species had learned to resolve disputes through diplomacy, economic pressure, or cultural exchange, humans still defaulted to military solutions. They had refined the art of war to a degree that no other species had ever achieved. Their military doctrine was particularly troubling. Most civilized species viewed warfare as a last resort to be avoided whenever possible. Humans seemed to view it as a normal tool of policy. They had phrases like peace through strength and speak softly and carry a big stick that showed how deeply militaristic thinking had penetrated their culture. Dr. Yolandra discovered that humans had actually weaponized their solar system. Their moon had been converted into a fortress equipped with weapons that could destroy approaching fleets. Their asteroid belt had been mined and turned into ammunition stockpiles. They had even placed weapons platforms in orbit around their star. The more she learned, the more concerned she became. Humans had not just maintained their military capabilities while developing space travel. They had expanded them to encompass their entire star system. Earth was not just a planet with weapons. It was a weapon. Computer, display human space infrastructure, Dr. Yolandra commanded. The holographic display showed the human home system in detail. What she saw made her blood run cold. Every major celestial body had been fortified. Space stations bristled with weapons. Automated defense platforms surrounded the inner planets. The entire system was designed as a layered defensive network that could destroy any attacking force. But the defenses were not just designed to protect against external threats. The positioning and capabilities suggested that humans were also prepared to fight wars within their own solar system. They had built their infrastructure to survive conflicts that would devastate less militarized civilizations. Dr. Ylandra began to understand why the human exploration ship was so heavily armed. To humans, the idea of sending an undefended vessel into unknown space was probably unthinkable. They lived in a universe where everything was a potential threat that needed to be destroyed before it could cause harm. The cultural analysis was even more disturbing than the military assessment. Human entertainment focused heavily on conflict and violence. Their stories celebrated warriors and conquerors. Their art often depicted battles and military victories. Even their sports were ritualized forms of combat. Most civilized species had moved beyond such primitive cultural expressions thousands of years ago. Art was supposed to inspire peace and harmony. Entertainment should promote understanding and cooperation. Humans seemed to glorify the very behaviors that other species had learned to suppress. Computer, analyze human diplomatic practices, Dr. Ylandra requested. The results confirmed her worst fears. Human diplomacy was based on negotiating from positions of strength. They believed that peace could only be achieved when all parties feared the consequences of war more than they desired the benefits of victory. This was completely contrary to galactic diplomatic principles, which emphasized mutual benefit and shared prosperity. Humans had a saying that captured their approach perfectly. If you want peace, prepare for war. They genuinely believed that the best way to prevent conflicts was to be so well armed that potential enemies would not dare to attack. This philosophy had led them to build the most militarized civilization in the galaxy. Dr. Ylandra compiled her findings into a comprehensive report for the Galactic Council. The conclusions were stark and frightening. Humanity was not just another species making contact with galactic civilization. They were a warrior culture that had never learned to be peaceful. The humans approaching their space were not explorers in the traditional sense. They were scouts for a civilization that viewed the galaxy as a potential battleground. Their ship carried enough weapons to destroy any vessel they encountered, not because they were aggressive, but because they could not imagine traveling any other way. The report's final section contained Dr. Ylandra's most troubling discovery. Humans had developed their military technology in isolation, without any external threats to justify such extreme measures. They had weaponized their entire civilization simply because conflict was so fundamental to their nature that they could not conceive of any alternative. As she prepared to transmit the report to the Galactic Council, Dr. Ylandra realized that first contact with humanity would change everything. The galaxy had grown comfortable with the assumption that all advanced species eventually became peaceful. Humans proved that assumption wrong. They were about to meet a civilization that had achieved technological advancement while remaining fundamentally warlike. Worse, their isolation meant that they had no understanding of how shocking their military capabilities were to peaceful species. They probably considered their exploration ship to be lightly armed. Dr. Ylandra's final recommendation to the Council was simple but urgent. Proceed with extreme caution. Humanity was unlike any species the galaxy had ever encountered. They were not evil or malicious, but they were dangerous in ways that peaceful civilizations could barely comprehend. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when an unstoppable force met a movable object, and Dr. Ylandra feared that the result would reshape the balance of power throughout civilized space. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of the UES Peacekeeper as it approached Nexus Prime. The massive human vessel dwarfed every other ship in the system, its dark hull reflecting the light of the distant star like polished obsidian. She had chosen the Peacekeeper deliberately for this historic first contact meeting. If the galaxy wanted to see what human diplomacy looked like, they needed to understand the foundation on which it rested. Ambassador, we are receiving multiple hails from Galactic Council security forces, reported Commander Torres from the bridge. They are requesting our intentions and asking us to reduce power output. Our reactor signature is apparently causing some concern among the local vessels. Sarah smiled slightly. The Peacekeeper was operating at minimum power levels, barely enough to maintain life support and basic systems. If the galaxy was nervous about that, they were not ready to see what human ships could really do. Respond with our diplomatic credentials and maintain current approach vector, Sarah instructed. Inform them that we are operating at minimal power settings for their safety and comfort. Through the observation deck's massive windows, Sarah could see the frantic activity around Nexus Prime. Dozens of ships were moving into defensive positions, their energy signatures flaring as they charged weapons and shields. It was an impressive display of military coordination, even if it would be completely useless against human weapons. The Galactic Council had made the same mistake that many civilizations made when first encountering humanity. They assumed that bigger meant more dangerous and that their existing military doctrines would apply to any new threat. The truth was more complicated and far more concerning for them. Ambassador, Commander Torres called again. Long-range sensors are detecting significant military buildup throughout the system. At least 40 warships from various galactic civilizations. They appear to be taking defensive positions. Understood, Sarah replied calmly. She had expected this reaction. The preliminary intelligence reports had made it clear that the galaxy was not prepared for humanity's approach to diplomacy. They still believed that negotiations happened between equals who shared similar capabilities and limitations. The Peacekeeper was designed to correct that misconception. As the ship drew closer to the station, Sarah could see the reactions of the galactic vessels through her tactical displays. Their sensors were working frantically to analyze the human ship, trying to understand what they were facing. The results would be enlightening for them, though not in the way they expected. "Ma'am," the tactical officer reported, "we are being scanned by multiple active sensors. Very intensive scans. They are trying to penetrate our hull." "Let them scan," Sarah said. "Make sure they get accurate readings. I want them to understand exactly what they are dealing with." The Peacekeeper had been built according to human diplomatic principles. It was not the most heavily armed ship in the fleet, but it was certainly the most impressive. Every system had been designed to demonstrate humanity's technological capabilities while maintaining the appearance of peaceful intentions. The ship's reactors could power a small city. Its defensive systems could stop any weapon in the galactic arsenal. Its kinetic cannons could destroy planets if necessary. But most importantly, its sensor arrays could detect and track every vessel within several light years. The galaxy would learn that humanity always knew who was watching them. "Incoming transmission from Nexus Prime," the communications officer announced. "High Counselor Theta 9 is requesting permission to speak with our delegation leader." "Put her through," Sarah instructed. The main display screen showed the artificial form of the Galactic Council's leader. Theta 9's synthesized features conveyed a mixture of diplomatic courtesy and barely concealed nervousness. "Ambassador Chen, welcome to Nexus Prime. I am High Counselor Theta 9. We are honored to host humanity's first formal diplomatic contact with galactic civilization." "Thank you, High Counselor. I bring greetings from Earth and the United Earth Government. We look forward to establishing peaceful relations with all member species of the Galactic Council." "Your vessel is quite impressive," Theta 9 continued carefully. "Our sensors indicate technological capabilities that exceed our current understanding. Perhaps you could provide some technical specifications to help us prepare appropriate docking facilities." Sarah understood the real question behind the diplomatic language. The galaxy wanted to know how dangerous the Peacekeeper was and whether their defenses could stop it if necessary. She decided to be helpful. "Of course, High Counselor. The Peacekeeper is one of our standard diplomatic vessels. It carries defensive systems appropriate for protecting diplomatic personnel in unknown environments. I will have my technical staff prepare a basic overview of our capabilities." What Sarah did not mention was that the basic overview would terrify anyone who understood its implications. The Peacekeeper's defensive capabilities alone exceeded the offensive power of most galactic battle fleets. Its weapons systems were classified as diplomatic tools only because humans considered them too small for actual military use. "We appreciate your cooperation," Theta 9 replied. "If I may ask, how many vessels does your fleet include?" "Our preliminary contacts suggested that this is not your only ship. Earth maintains 3 primary fleet commands," Sarah explained matter-of-factly. "The exploration fleet handles scientific research and first contact missions. The defense fleet protects our home system and established colonies. And we have a strategic command that handles situations requiring more specialized responses." She paused to let the implications sink in. The galaxy was dealing with a civilization that had organized its military forces into separate specialized commands. This was not a species that had stumbled into space with a few crude ships. This was a power that had systematically militarized the galaxy. "How many ships are in each fleet?" Theta 9 asked. "The exact numbers are classified for security reasons," Sarah replied diplomatically. but I can tell you that Earth takes the protection of its interests very seriously. We have sufficient ships to handle any reasonable defensive requirements. What Sarah meant, and what the galaxy would eventually learn, was that humanity had built enough ships to fight wars on multiple fronts simultaneously. The exploration fleet alone numbered in the hundreds. The defense fleet was even larger, and Strategic Command possessed weapons that could sterilize entire star systems if necessary. Ambassador Chen, Theta 9 continued, "Some of our military advisors have expressed concern about the weapons systems on your vessels. They appear to be quite powerful for ships on peaceful missions." Sarah nodded understandingly. "I appreciate their concern, High Counselor. Humanity has learned through experience that the galaxy can be a dangerous place. Our ships are equipped with defensive systems that allow us to protect ourselves and our allies from any threats we might encounter." The statement was technically true, though incomplete. Human ships were equipped to defend against threats that the galaxy had never imagined. They could fight wars that civilized species had forgotten were possible. And they were all considered defensive because humans genuinely believed that the best defense was overwhelming offensive capability. "Perhaps we could arrange a demonstration of our commitment to peaceful relation," Sarah suggested. "I have brought gifts from Earth that represent our cultural achievements. Art, music, literature that shows our peaceful intentions." "That would be most welcome," Theta 9 replied with obvious relief. What the High Counselor did not realize was that human art, music, and literature would provide an even more disturbing insight into humanity's nature than their weapon systems. Human culture celebrated warriors, honored sacrifice in battle, and glorified the concept of fighting against impossible odds. Their peaceful gifts would show the galaxy that humanity's militaristic nature went far deeper than mere technology. As the Peacekeeper approached its assigned docking bay, Sarah reflected on the historic nature of this moment. Humanity was about to take its place among galactic civilization, but that place would be very different from what anyone expected. The galaxy had spent thousands of years building a peaceful order based on mutual cooperation and shared prosperity. They had created institutions designed to prevent conflicts and resolve disputes through negotiation and compromise. It was an impressive achievement that had brought stability to countless worlds, but it had also made them soft. Humanity was about to introduce them to a very different approach to galactic relations. An approach based on the principle that peace was only possible when everyone understood the consequences of war. The galaxy would learn that humans were perfectly willing to be peaceful neighbors, as long as everyone remembered who had the bigger guns. "Ambassador," Commander Torres reported, "we are receiving priority communications from Earth. Admiral Harrison requests a status update on the diplomatic mission." "Inform the Admiral that first contact has proceeded according to plan," Sarah replied. "The galaxy is beginning to understand humanity's position. I expect negotiations to be very productive." As the Peacekeeper settled into its docking bay, Sarah prepared for the next phase of human diplomacy. The galaxy had seen their ships and weapons. Now they would meet the people who built them,